Welcome to Success Story, the most useful podcast in the world. I'm your host, Scott D. Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot Podcast Network, as well as the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Now, the HubSpot Podcast Network has incredible shows like the Martech Podcast hosted by Benjamin Shapiro. The Martech podcast is all about maximum value in 30 minutes or less. The Martech podcast shares stories from world-class marketers who use technology to generate growth and achieve business and career success all on your lunch break. If you like any of these topics, you're going to love the Martech podcast. Some of the topics are zeroing in on the ideal product price point, identifying loyalty plays for smart marketers, finding the line between sales and marketing and SaaS, extending the lifetime value of your customer. If these are topics that are interesting to you, go check out the Martech podcast hosted by Ben Shapiro wherever you get your podcasts. Today, my guest is Matt Stang. He is the CEO of Delic Holdings. Previous to Delic, he was an owner and operator of High Times for almost 17 years. The position that he had at High Times was instrumental in legalizing cannabis in multiple states and launched the Cannabis Cup in America. After interacting with the cannabis community for 2 decades, he helped found Delic in 2019 as one of his first psychedelic wellness corporations. He shapes the company's vision and path using his expertise in branding, marketing, business development, and product viability. What Delic is doing is incredible. They are leading psychedelic wellness. They are a platform. They're committed to bringing science-backed benefits to all and reframing the psychedelic conversation. The company owns and operates an umbrella of related businesses, including the trusted media and e-commerce platforms like Reality Sandwich and Delic Radio, Delic Labs, the only licensed entity by Health Canada to exclusively focus on research and development of psilocybin vaporization technology. They also own Meet Delic, the premier psychedelic wellness event, and they own ketamine infusion centers all across the country. So what do we speak about? Well, ultimately, Matt just gave me a rundown about why he chose to go into psychedelics, probably based on his experience going into cannabis and why he wants to enable people to use substances that can actually help them and better themselves and better their lives. He speaks about why some of these substances were illegal in the first place and why he is on a mission to help people get access to these substances through education and actual clinics that can help people live a better life with some of the various substances that are classified as psychedelics. We spoke about everything from psilocybin to ketamine to LSD to MDMA, and how all of these different things can impact a certain part of your life in a different way, in a positive way if done properly. So a lot of interesting lessons on building a company in an industry that is not even entirely legal yet. So some great lessons there, some really interesting insights on how to use psychedelics and some of the results that they can give people for depression and mental health and well-being are absolutely incredible. Let's jump right into it. This is Matt Stang, CEO of Delic Holdings.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. What is my superhero origin story? I was I was in a lab when I was 16, and I got bit by a radioactive spider, and these crazy things
I've heard this
happened.
one
And I was
before.
swinging around. Sorry, no, I think that's a different story. Um, yeah, my origin story uh, in this business, I would say, runs through cannabis. I was an owner and operator of a company called High Times for about 17 years before selling it to a private equity group. So where did that begin? It began with me writing a senior thesis in college about marijuana legalization in a time of terror, because it was 2001, and looking at how the criminalization and drug war around cannabis was not only a major social issue, but also an economic issue, and looking at trying to take away the tax money, the they add tax money from the taxation of cannabis, as we've seen, it's pretty massive, and take away from the cost of fighting the drug war. And so I wrote a 70-page thesis on how we could convince the other side of the aisle at that point and the broad majority of the left wing and the vast majority of the right wing by giving people an economic incentive to change a messed up set of rules. And I created that, wrote it, went for a quote from the general counsel of High Times, who I knew through someone, and he read the thesis and said, "Love to have you come in and intern at the company." And that was it for me. I left, graduated from college, started at High Times 12 days later, and worked my way up from an internship to owning part of it and operating the company. And so that was my origin story. I've been a true believer in changing the illegal nature of certain uh, substances. I think that there's a major disconnect between a country that promotes liberty and freedom and then jails people for going after their best life. So, for me, cannabis was the first piece, a gateway drug, as they say, and psychedelics are what's next, right? And I think the science has really got there. We formed this company, my wife and I, about little over 3 years ago now, and when we created it, it was really that the supposition that the tipping point was coming for psychedelics the way it had come for cannabis. And 3.5 years ago when we formed it, that wasn't very obvious to a lot of people. I think today it really is. And that just comes down to simple facts, right? You just look at the science and you look at the mental health pandemic that's sweeping behind the actual pandemic, and the fact that we just don't have good mechanisms for helping people with mental health disorders. And that's how I get here today as the CEO of Delic Corp and co-founder with my wife. And I think my origin story is just always tilting at these windmills, really trying to change things that are fundamentally wrong in society. And I think you can do really great things by changing things and also be economically successful.
Now, why would some of these treatments or some of the things you're working on with Delacorp and even like the mindset of the government when you first were starting in cannabis, why are some of these, to tee it up for people that don't really know the history, why are some of these botanicals, I don't even know the proper terminology, so maybe correct me, but why are some of these items illegal in the first place?
Wow, how long do you have? Because that's a very long. I mean, some of the stuff dates back to Harry Anslinger and his 1930s war on mostly brown, mostly Mexican folks bringing in marijuana. There's also, the latter day drug warriors, which really results from Richard Nixon and his unhappiness with the protest movement against Vietnam, and utilizing essentially the structures that were in place already. There were already laws against it, but no one had spent time and energy really enforcing it the way that the war on drugs did. And so the war on drugs, as we know it, really happened in the Nixon administration. It started obviously long before then. A friend of mine wrote a 450-page book on this, so there's a lot to talk about. But if you want the like, hey, I'm just driving to a 7-Eleven and back, and I only kind of want to hear that. It's basically, there's been a lot of incentives alignment for jailing folks who are marginalized, who are trying to get their own voice, and you can't do that in this country for them being marginalized and trying to get their own voice. But what you can do is criminalize behavior that is easy to spot and then go and arrest them all. So you look at how they took down the Black Panthers, you look at how they took down a lot of the new left kind of hippie vanguard folks, and it really comes down to they can't get them for free speech, but they can get them for drugs because they're going to wind up smoking a joint. And that's a pretty easy way to throw them in jail for 5 years. And so,
And
there's a lot of that
so
underlying the war on drugs, and that's, I think, what makes it so incredibly wrong. You look at prohibition and how it started and what it did. It built a criminal class, and it built a total new world of people who were just, everybody was breaking the law during prohibition because everybody wanted to drink. Not everybody, but 50-60% of the population became lawbreakers, and then all of these places where drinking happened became their own gambling halls or houses of ill repute or vice halls or whatever you want to call them. And that all came from taking something that was regulated and pretty good, okay, and then slamming it out and putting it in the hands of criminals who could now make 10, 15, 30 times their money on bringing this product in, right? And that same misalignment that created, all of the gangsterism and the Cosa Nostra and all these other things is the same thing that happened with the war on drugs. You take things that people want, and that the underlying issue is that people want these drugs, right? The reason that Miami in 1980 had 11 times the cash running through its federal bank that all the other federal banks in America did is because people were buying the cocaine, right? There's no question that people were buying the weed. They were buying all of these substances because people fundamentally like to alter themselves. And I think if you look at it at a high level, kids start when they're young. Look at the marketing for sugary cereals. Sugary cereals are one of, sugar is probably the quickest acting narcotic substance known to man. And it really changes your state immediately. And once it goes away, you want more of it. And you look at coffee that, 60% of the population drinks every morning. It's a drug, right? So it's just, what we've done is created this odd situation where a bunch of drugs are legal, Fortune 500 companies with great marketing and on every shelf everywhere, and then other ones are pushed in the back and you go to jail if you touch it, and yet people still want it. So I think fundamentally what we see is that things are changing, right? The cannabis changes are quicker than I even thought possible. When I first lobbied for the first state for legalization, when we put up all this stuff for safer, that marijuana is safer than alcohol, which it is, and that message caught, and they won the initiative in Colorado, and it became legal, and people went and saw this is not breaking the country apart. It's not causing crime to rise. It's actually just getting a bunch of more tax dollars, and now people don't have to step into illegal areas to do that, and so they're not exposed to negative illegal kind of things. So I think that same presupposition and the same trail that's been blazed is the same thing that we're looking at in psychedelics. There's something in New Hampshire today that's going through to try to decriminalize psychedelics for all people. New Jersey decriminalized magic mushrooms. It's just been places that I grew up in New York. Going across to New Jersey 20 years ago, it was the place that if you had the smallest amount of pot on you, you were going to go to jail for 2 years, right? It was like total police state. Now it's fully legal, and they're embracing psychedelics as well. So I think this change is happening, and it's a sea change in how people see stuff, and I think a lot of it comes from just the scientific consensus around what these novel compounds can do. So you're seeing a lot of action and heat around all these different compounds. Psilocybin is in phase 3 clinical trials with the FDA. MDMA is in phase 3 clinical trials. We at Delic have the largest chain of ketamine clinics in America, so you can go, and the only FDA cleared substance that has that psychedelic effect that allows people to really turn off their default mode network and change their mind. We think it's just a sea change in how people work with mental health, because it's just there's too many people who are depressed, anxious, have PTSD, whatever you want to call it, and people want to change it, and they have, what do they have? They have benzodiazepine and other anti-anxiety medications that have horrible side effects and are addictive as hell, or they have
Yeah.
antidepressants that make you feel like you're in a fog, that over half the time they don't work. People have depressive relapses. They have to change drugs every couple months. They feel like they're just stuck in this haze. They can't be up or down. All of this stuff, and it's just it doesn't. It's a broken system, right? And I think we have a technology at hand that the science shows actually has curative properties in 60-70% of people. It's not a panacea. It's not going to fix the world immediately. Everyone's not going to be saved, but it's just getting it out there and letting, 60-70% of people get better and not have to be stuck on a constant pill from a pharmaceutical company that doesn't really fix them, but keeps them from spiraling worse. It's not a great answer. Some people are going to still need that. There's some people who psychedelic medicine won't work for. So I'm not going to be unrealistic. It's just there's a large, and I would say more than a majority of people for whom this will be helpful. And people are seeing that. And what I've seen in my origin story is that a lot of this comes down to your friend, your cousin, your aunt, your nephew, your niece telling you, hey, this helped me. And then that touches 40, 50, 70 people who that person is close to. And that's what happened with cannabis when we launched the first medical marijuana magazine 18 years ago, and really pushed that narrative that the science was there, even though here's the thing with cannabis, you couldn't even do this work. You had to do it like around the edges because of the only way you could get a licensed cannabis product to try was through the DEA from the University of Mississippi. The weed is like 4% THC and it looks like dirt. So, and to get that, it would take 4 years of applications to maybe qualify for getting a small amount of it. So, a lot of the work that we were basing it on was just doctors and folks who were stepping outside of the normal medical procedure because they saw what was happening to their patients at medical marijuana places and seeing tumor shrink and seizures stop and all of these things. And they were like, well, fuck, if this works, we gotta, like, we can't wait for the government to allow us to do this work, right? And so that's where it came from. And with psychedelics, the nice thing is these substances are available for the scientists to do their work. So there's an incredible amount of data pouring out every month or two, showing efficacy, showing how it can help with different things. Looking at social anxiety and microdosing. That's like, I would say 30% of the population has some form of social anxiety. Or just uncomfortable, and especially after the pandemic, I think most people are a little uncomfortable in crowds now.
100%. More than ever. More than ever. It's not easy like that. The mental health concerns coming out of the pandemic are exponentially increased pre-pandemic. So this is needed more than ever, for sure. No, I was just thinking. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just think there's so much opportunity to help people and shift their perspective in their life, and I think it's really heartening to see. I get from my team, I get emails every day from people who have gone into our clinics and talking about how it's changed their life. Or we had a veteran in yesterday who said he felt like changed, and he couldn't believe that he's able to be up and awake and with his family and not have these racing thoughts and this like PTSD, right? He serves his country and has a great deal of PTSD and anxiety, and he hasn't felt free of it in 6 years. And he said this today. He was at one of our clinics 2 days ago, and he said yesterday was the first day he's felt that in 6 or 7 years. So, feeling that change in people is pretty amazing. And I think the more of that happens, the more that amplifies outwards, the more people whose lives are touched by it, the more people won't stand for, um, all this stuff being pushed into a closet. And that's what's happened with cannabis. You have, now 93% of the population supports medical marijuana, where when I started, it was like 22%. So it's probably the greatest sea change in American politics that I've seen, and 60 something percent support full legalization now. So it's ahead of any political party. So I think you'll see over the next couple of years, as people get treated and as people get better through these medicines, you're going to see a similar story where you can't, like, you can be as whatever political side you happen to be on, but if your kid or your niece or your friend's kid and they're like suicidal and then they're not, and you're like, how the fuck did that change? And it's like, oh well, they went and did a ketamine therapy, or they went and did psilocybin therapy. You can't argue. There's no arguing. You're just like, wow, that okay. I'll store that away, because if I hear about someone else with that kind of issue, I'll make sure they go do that.
I just want to take a second and thank the sponsor of today's episode, HubSpot. Now, if you're tired of slowing down your teams with clunky software, processes, and marketing that's difficult to scale, HubSpot is here to help you and your business grow better. With collaboration tools and built-in SEO optimizations, HubSpot's CRM platform is tailor-made to help you scale your marketing with ease. Integrated calendars, tasks, and commenting help hybrid teams stay connected, while automated SEO recommendations intuitively optimize your web page content for increased organic traffic. Ditch the difficult and dial up your marketing with tools that are easy to use and easy to scale. Learn how your business can grow better at HubSpot.com. Yeah. Can you walk through so you mentioned a few things: psilocybin, ketamine, microdosing. People that are new to this, they don't understand what this industry is all about. Everybody gets cannabis. You speak about cannabis, there's no one is confused, but a lot of these items people may have not heard of before. So what are some of the substances? What are some of the applications? What are some of the things that fall under the umbrella of psychedelic wellness? And just like walk through them, because I want to understand like what some of these things can actually be used for, what and I know that a lot of the stuff is not like FDA approved, right? There's studies, but it's ongoing. But
Yep,
anecdotally, like what would some of the stuff be used for?
for sure. So I mean, that is a big part of this, right? So as a company, we are only doing things that are fully um, legal and FDA approved. So we're running
Mm-hmm.
clinics that do ketamine, which is the one substance that is FDA approved. We have 13 clinics around the country where people can go in and get a treatment. What does that look like? You come in, you get an intravenous solution of ketamine for an hour and a half for mental disorders, or 4 hours for pain disorders. And you sit there, and it is unlike anything uh, I've ever seen. And you basically disassociate from yourself. You feel, people have described it as feeling like floating, or like like you're out, almost out of your body. And when you're done with the experience, people report an almost immediate sense of anxiety going away, spinning thoughts, racing thoughts, depression. So it's really kind of incredible. So that's ketamine. That's the one thing that's there. Now you're asking about the rest of the stuff I'm talking about. And that is still outside of the scope of what's allowed in this country. Actually, 3 days ago, Canada, um, we have a lab in Canada that has a license for psilocybin and cannabis. So Canada just allowed for doctors to write recommendations to patients to utilize these psychedelic substances, and Health Canada will give an exemption if someone is in major crisis or not long to live, or they've created a whole new setup. Just started this week, so we'll see how it plays out. But they're allowing because of the breakthrough nature of these therapies, they're allowing people to not wait the time it takes for approval because they see low incidence of abuse and also um, very low incidence of actual negative side effects, other than the classic bad trip where you feel kind of crazy. But that a lot of times for people with these disorders helps, right? Because you're going into an experience and you're processing through something like a traumatic stress, and it can be really scary inside of it. But then when you come back with this sense of connection. So, sorry, back to your main question: what are these things? I can walk through kind of the substances that exist right now, and what they're being used for and where. So, top of mind, just because of the science, would be psilocybin. We have multiple high level programs, ones at Johns Hopkins, ones at NYU, ones at Imperial College of London. These are major research institutions doing work around psychedelic therapy, and psilocybin was the original one that people really focused on because it's low incidence of abuse, low side effects, and has really strong results. So right now, there's a company called Compass Pathways that is a large public company that's based around psilocybin therapy. They're in phase 3 clinical trials with their synthesized psilocybin, and they've been studying it for depression and mood disorders, and then they have some phase 2 trials around other things. I think they're doing smoking cessation, it's end of life care. But what does it do? You take a dose. It lasts 4 to 6 hours. Your default mode network, which is the central processing core of your brain that you use to make sure the door is closed or the oven's off, or just kind of keeps you looking both ways when you cross the street, that shuts off. And new neural pathways are built. So they've done a bunch of brain scans, and parts of your brain that don't fire for years or decades, things from childhood, fire in random different patterns. What does that do? It creates these psychedelic experiences. The resulting experience usually, now this is not always because it's very different for people, but there seems to be a commonality of feeling, a feeling of connection, a feeling of awe, or a sense that you are part of something bigger, almost a psycho-spiritual moment, and then a sense that things will be okay, right? And a lot of this comes down to people's brain thinking things aren't going to be okay. They're in fight or flight. They're in a sense that they're under attack, even if they're just sitting there doing nothing. And that, I think, is a big part of this psychedelic revolution, is allowing people to get outside of their brain a little bit and kind of quiet down this default mode network that is overactive in people with mental and mood disorders. So what
Amazing.
else is there? Yeah, please.
No, I was gonna say the only other question I had was, so you have ketamine, you have psilocybin, and then I guess there's so many other strange applications that I feel I've heard of, but obviously these are not FDA approved by any means, but that, like, shutting off that system, does that allow for more creativity? Or because you always now hear stories of CEOs microdosing to help them with their creativity or their productivity, does that fall under that same mechanism, or is that something different?
Yeah, so the microdose is at least as the scientist. I'm not a scientist, so I don't want to
No, I
be
know
quoted
there's
as.
a lot of caveats, and I know you're publicly traded. I don't want to get you in trouble. I just find
No,
it
no,
super interesting. So, yeah.
perfectly fine. And I would say, like, the explanation that's been given to me by scientists is that the subperceptual dose, the microdose, it acts completely differently on the brain as a macro dose, a perceptual dose. And so what it's doing is it's stimulating kind of blood flow and a little bit greater awareness and empathy, and just kind of pushing people to be a little bit more connected with themselves and a little less distant from their environment themselves. They lock in, they're a little bit more focused, and I think there's been a huge push in microdosing. Mushrooms are the ones that is the main thing, but so LSD has also been a big, and I know folks are developing. There's one company in phase 2A clinical trials with psilocybin microdose, and another company in phase 2 clinical trials for LSD microdosing. So I know they've had enough success to make it through a whole round of FDA testing, and it's noticeably working. It's just this is going to take another 2 or 3 years to get out there. There's also folks doing off-site kind of places. There's Jamaica allows for psilocybin, so there's a bunch of psilocybin resorts there. It's obviously with COVID, it's a little difficult. Amsterdam allows for psilocybin products to be sold, so there's people doing Amsterdam psilocybin and microdosing products. So that's it's around right now. There's clearly a lot of people doing this, and then obviously the kind of West Coast Silicon Valley folks. It's been pretty ingrained in the society there for the last couple of years that microdosing is part of kind of that biohacking mindset. And I think it's an incredibly powerful substance to help change people that way. I think when you're asking about the creativity side, what I've seen on the science is that the macro dose is the one that it really shuts down the default mode and opens up the other brain neurons, and it has proven to regrow neurons in scientific testing. Doesn't mean it will do so every time in your brain, but the underlying suggestion is that using these psychedelic novel compounds to both turn off your default mode, open up the rest of your brain, and then regrow neuron connections in your brain so you can perform at a better or higher level, right? And that's what people are really looking at.
Amazing. Now, as you built this company out, I thought it was interesting that you don't just have these clinics. You also, I see a little bit of a strategy that I think you're deploying, probably from High Times, because it seems like you're building out a media company to support the actual company and any initiative you take on in the future, because you have an umbrella of products. I can see you're going all over podcasts. You're going. I think you actually have like an actual podcast yourself. So you're building out all these ancillary products. So walk me through the actual strategy that you used to build Delic Holdings, and why you're sort of building out Reality Sandwich, Delic Radio, Delic Labs. What's another one? You have Meet Delic. Like you have all these different things. Yeah.
Yeah, we had the largest psychedelic event in America last year, Meet Delic, in Las Vegas. Sold out in 2 days. So why are we doing this? I think when you look at the reality of business today, there's a couple of main level gatekeepers, the Googles, Facebooks of the world, that intermediate your connection to the interested parties, or you can have a direct connection. And so we've really looked at this as an opportunity to build a new line company that has a direct connection to the people who are interested in psychedelic wellness. So we have Reality Sandwich, a platform that gets 300,000 or 400,000 people a month. We have the largest psychedelic trade show in America, Meet Delic. We have a Delic Radio, the podcast network, and then we have the Delic Labs, the kind of science backing to kind of back up all this stuff we keep talking about. We have 10 PhDs working for us. And what we've really looked at is building this ecosystem as a means to, help people understand what mainstream psychedelic wellness looks like. And then if they're interested, they can come to one of our clinics and try it.
And do you see the market growing? So you're in it right now. You have the clinics. Like walk me through the interest in this particular industry, and who is interested right now. Is it people that are younger that may be early adopters in something new, or is it people that are older? Like what's the demographics of people that are starting to really get interested in the psychedelic wellness?
Yeah, it is pretty broad range, right? We have folks who are 65 and have been trying different stuff for their whole life, and they see a special or an article, and they're like, can I finally stop taking 5 different pills for this? Wow, that would be amazing. And then we have, 22-year-olds who are looking for a way to hack their anxiety, and I think everything in between. So, there's not a psychographic profile that is the singular person we're going after, because it's just such a broad um, amount of people who have these issues. There's 51 million people with some mental health disorder in America today, and those numbers are from before the pandemic. I would kind of hazard that about half of the population has some form of PTSD or anxiety today, based on what we've all gone through for the last 2 years. So there's a lot of people, and people are looking for things that aren't just taking a pharmaceutical drug every day. I think that's the big change that's been happening over the last couple of years, and we want to be a big part of helping that change move forward.
Now, a follow up to that, an interesting point on cannabis. So now cannabis is much more popular, but a lot of the application can be recreational. Some of the things that you're mentioning here are directly replacing drugs that are put out by large organizations, by huge organizations that are supposed to
Mm-hmm.
combat mental health and well-being. So how do you see this playing out? How do you see some of these options replacing some drugs that it's such an entrenched industry with billions of dollars supporting it? How do you think that we'll ever get these I guess treatments to ever be something that a doctor would prescribe over some drug that's they're getting lobbied by all of these big pharma? How do we actually take this and make it so that it's the de facto treatment if it's just as effective and healthier for the patient?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to patient awareness, right? So in the end, people get to really choose their own treatment, right? A doctor can tell you this would be good, but you get to go to a different doctor if you're not happy with it. You get to decide how to treat yourself, and I think a lot of this is building awareness and making sure that people understand this is an option. Because once people understand there is an option, a lot of them are looking to take it, right? They want to find a way to help themselves without creating all these negative things that the pharmaceutical companies put out, right? What I'm saying
Yeah.
is, it's not going to take over completely, because this doesn't work 100%. Nothing works 100%. If someone tells you something works 100%, they're full of shit, right? This is our internal numbers show about 72% of people are markedly improved after 1 week of treatment, and after 6 months that number stays around 72 or 73%. So there's a lot of people, at least among our sample subset of about 80,000 people that have gone through our clinics, that are markedly better. Does that mean that everybody's going to come through this? No. I think a lot of this is also going to be going through drug companies, right? The Compass, the psilocybin business, is a billion-dollar publicly traded drug company. So if it gets pushed through FDA, which everyone believes it will, then does a Pfizer or Novartis come and buy it? Probably, right? So, like, is the reality that these large pharmaceutical companies are banks with patents? Does that mean that they go and buy things that are breakthrough therapies? Yeah, that's their job. I had a friend who helped create GW Pharmaceutical, which is the first people to create a pharmaceutical cannabis spray that was a whole plant extract, and they got bought for $7.5 billion last year, right? So there's by a large drug company, and that's the likelihood is that you're still you're still going to be paying pharmaceutical companies money for these treatments when they get pushed through. Now, there's another company, MAPS, that is they're a nonprofit that turned into a mutual benefit corporation, and they're doing MDMA, so they're fairly far along on the phase 3 for MDMA. They have specifically said they won't sell to a drug company. So if you're doing MDMA therapy, you probably will be supporting further drug legalization because they're planning on taking the money they make from that and reinvesting it into lobbying for more change to the drug laws. So it's really comes down to, and there's, so when you asked me before, what else is there? There's ayahuasca, DMT, um, peyote. There's toad, which is another form of DMT, 5-MeO DMT. There's ibogaine, which is perhaps the best anti-addiction treatment ever. I've personally seen two people go. They have it in Mexico. You can go. You're addicted to heroin. You do this treatment for a couple of days. You're not addicted to heroin. Now,
Wow.
the problem is it doesn't actually address your psychological urge that drives you to numb yourself to the point of doing heroin. So physical addiction is one thing. Your psychosocial mental addiction is a whole nother thing. And, it comes down to like, you need something else beyond the ibogaine if you want to then go and address the gap in you that needs some form of dream state for most of your life, right? But that comes as well.
Where do you see all things are moving in the direction that they're moving right now, at the velocity they're moving right now? Where do you see both Delic, yourself, but also the industry in 5 to 10 years?
Sure. Well, I see Delic as the largest chain of psychedelic clinics, moving beyond just ketamine and being there for any novel compounds. I think having 100, 150 of these around the country, and people feeling like there's a safe, effective, clean, well-run, reproducible model that they can go to wherever they are if they need a treatment. I think that's something that we want to be and have the framework for building. As an industry, I think, it's a dual track, right? You look at what Oregon did last year. They legalized psilocybin for non-FDA medical use. So when I say medical use, they're doing it in a way that's outside of FDA framework, and they're going to allow people to just open clinics for psilocybin treatment early next year. So do I think other states are going to have similar, ballot initiatives? Yeah, I think you see California will probably gear up for one. Some of the other liberal Western states that have ballot initiative modes will have some form of, whether it be decriminalization or legalization. We've had 24 municipalities just legalize entheogenic plants or any psychedelic substance. So it's happening all over the place. So that's on the one side. And then on the other side, I think there will be 10, say 5 years from now, there'll be like 6 or 7 psychedelic compounds that will be legal. 10 years, there will be like 15, 30. So there'll be a lot of tools in the tool chest. And, if one thing works for people 70% of the time, the other thing 68 and 63, well, you find out by going in and trying one of the things. And if you're markedly better, great. And if not, you can go back and try a different one in 2 months and see if that one will help crack whatever's going on with you, because the brain is literally the most complicated thing on a human, right? It's just, we still haven't cracked it. We still, they're talking about AI, but they can't make a computer do anything near what a brain can do. Tesla's been working for 5 years on having their thing drive itself. I have a Tesla. When it goes, I've had a bunch of times where I'm in autopilot and it just acts fucking crazy. And you're like, what the fuck? But it's a machine. It can't actually process. A human brain sees a cone, they see a car driving, you see all of these different things, and you put it all together and you say, slow down or speed up, right? And that's a huge processing thing that no one can really figure out or change right now. So I just think there's a lot to be learned, and this is part of hacking how to make the brain a really a better tool and stop fighting ourselves with it.
Amazing. It's super interesting. I want to pivot into some rapid fire just to pull out some insights from your career and the businesses you've built. But before I pivot, is there any other things that that you wanted to go into that we didn't go into, and also most importantly, where do people connect with you? Where do people go find more information about Delic, about some of the clinics, about some of the publication or the media that you put together, all the socials, the website, all that?
Sure. So I don't think there's anything that we didn't talk about, but connect with me. Deliccorp.com is the top level site with all the information, and you can write in and ask any questions you want. Ketamine Wellness Centers is the name of the chain of clinics, KWC, Ketamine Wellness Centers. Meet Delic is the name of the event around psychedelic wellness. We got another one already on the books for 2022 in November in Las Vegas. Reality Sandwich, if you want to learn more about psychedelic compounds and what you can do, realitysandwich.com. And, love to hear from anyone, any questions. I think we love powering this revolution. We think it's going to change the world.
Amazing. Okay, let's do some rapid fire. The biggest challenge that you've had to overcome in a professional or personal aspect in your professional personal life, what was that challenge? How'd you overcome it?
Biggest challenge, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember one time I was running our Cannabis Cup for High Times, and we got a notice. We had an event coming up in 3 days, and I got a notice from the city of Los Angeles that they were not going to allow us to do the event. We had it booked and happening that Saturday. It was Wednesday morning, and they said, you can't do this event. We had about 150 booths and 8,000 people showing up on Saturday, and I had to spend about 24 hours straight, did not sleep, just calling everyone I knew. And I found a venue in San Bernardino called the National Orange Show, NOS Center, and managed to get them to give us their parking lot to do the event. Got that contracted Thursday night at 8 p.m. Friday morning, had to send the trucks out. And then this was 2011, 2012, one of those. So social media wasn't super advanced, but we used Facebook and email to let everyone know, hey, sorry, the cops have made it so we can't do the event in downtown Los Angeles anymore. We're now an hour and 10 minutes away in San Bernardino. And somehow we got 2,000 more people than we thought we'd get, because the amount of engagement we got from talking about the cops movement, making us move it, got a ton of social interaction back when you could actually have organic social interaction, not like paid like now. And I managed to get all the booths and have the tents set up in a new place, and people showed up, and we had a rockin' event. And so it was a huge challenge, and definitely responsible for a couple of these gray hairs here. But we made it through.
That's
it.
pure entrepreneur. Just figure it out. Pure entrepreneur.
In
That's
our
it.
event space
Yeah.
for years afterwards, and we grew to do 30,000 people there. So it was fantastic.
Amazing. One person, obviously there's been many, but one person who's had an impact on your life. Who was that person? What did they teach you?
A great question. I would say my mentor at High Times, Michael Kennedy. He was the general counsel who pulled me in to become an intern, and I worked with him for many years till he passed away. And he really taught me, you never go down. You keep going. You just keep fighting. He was a world-renowned legal lion. He had argued before the Supreme Court. He was Timothy Leary's lawyer, and had been Ivanka Trump's lawyer when she divorced Donald Trump, and really incredible fighter. And just he's never surrender, never give up, just keep going. You just got to keep fucking going.
Amazing. A book, podcast, something that you've read or listened to, other than the stuff that you put out, that you'd recommend people go check out.
I really enjoyed Lex Friedman talking to Elon Musk a couple weeks ago. I thought that was a fantastic conversation.
That was a good podcast. Yeah.
Really, really, Lex is very intellectual, and it's great to hear all of the craziness about Mars. Right? Got to go to the future.
He's done. He's actually done three. I think that's his third one with Elon Musk, if I'm not mistaken. But he's Lex is a great podcaster. He's a great podcaster because he just cuts through all the BS. He's just like a very like analytical person. So it makes for like a really great interviewer because he just asks questions that are just like there's no bias in his questions. There's he hides
Yeah,
nothing.
that's
He's
the
just like to the
principle.
point. He's robotic,
It goes to
but it's
the
good.
principle, just like the scientific method.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. If you could tell your 20-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Life is pretty awesome.
It's a good one. That's good. And then last question, what does success mean to you?
What does success mean? I guess time. Success means time. Time to do
I
what
love
you
it.
want to do.